Okay, good afternoon, everyone.
Small screen.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's 3 o'clock, so I'd like to call this Planning and Development Committee meeting to order. Can I get an approval of the agenda, please? Motion to approve it. Councillor Kroll, you had a recommendation?
I was going to suggest that because we have a great number of attendees today, that we might want to move inquiries up rather than leaving them right till the very end.
Okay, so you're making that motion?
Yes.
Does somebody second that motion? Okay, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? That's so can you, are you, Mayor Beamish opposed? Okay, Councillor Lumley? Sorry, you're muted.
Opposed.
Opposed.
Okay, I'm opposed as well, just because I would like to jump into the agenda myself. And because we do have a number of correspondence from the public already, and hopefully everyone's had a chance to review all that correspondence. So I'd like to, so having said that, I will call again. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as is? Councillor Kroll? Councillor DeAndrade? All in favor? Okay, thank you. I'd like to acknowledge, first of all, that we are meeting on the traditional territory of the Squamish First Nation. I'd also like to point out that we've got 4 fairly beefy reports on our agenda this afternoon. This agenda is supposed to be a 2-hour meeting, so I'd just like people to kind of keep in mind if we could keep the discussion to about half an hour roughly for each report, that will help keep us on track, recognizing that perhaps one of them might take a little bit more discussion than others. So having said that, I'd like to move on to section 3 under reports. I'll move it over to the Director of Planning for a report on the George Hotel and Residences, request for an extension of the Form and Character Development Permit, DP 2018-05, and the Land Exchange Agreement. So over to you, Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair Ladwig. So this report summarizes a letter received from the developer of the George Hotel and Residences, who is requesting a 2-year extension on the Form and Character Development Permit and the Land Exchange Agreement due to severe and adverse financial and market conditions precipitated by the COVID-19 pandemic. So the Land Exchange Agreement is an agreement that outlines the steps required to build the development as proposed, based on the zoning and Form and Character Development Permit. The development property contains 5 separate lots on either side of the lower portion of Wynn Road. All the lots and Wynn Road will be consolidated into one development site with a public plaza through the middle. What was agreed to by the town and the developer was that the developer would purchase a piece of land that is under the road to be used for underground parking, while the above ground road portion would be exchanged as a public plaza through the development site. The land exchange agreement outlines the steps required to achieve this, which includes a purchase price for the underground parking, which is $61,600. So in order to accomplish what is proposed, a 3-dimensional subdivision has to take place, which is called an airspace parcel subdivision. Wynn Road has to be closed, which involves a road closure process. A road dedication area must be established for the public parcel or the public plaza, and a number of statutory right-of-ways for the waterfront walkway and waterworks are required. Again, this has all been agreed to by the town and the developer, which outlines the steps to basically prepare the site for development. Because this was initially executed in 2017, staff are recommending obtaining an updated purchase price for the underground parking, which is currently valued at $61,600. The Form and Character Development Permit is a permit required to ensure that the form and character meets the intent of DPA number 5, so the Gibsons Landing Development Permit area for the Gibsons waterfront. The official community plan outlines that criteria. The DP was initially brought to the previous Advisory Planning Commission in 2013, and after a number of revisions was supported by that APC in 2014. In May 2016, Council authorized approval of the form and character DP, and then again in 2018, Council approved the form and character DP again. And that made sense from a planning perspective, since the form and character criteria hadn't changed, and it still hasn't changed. So this report outlines two options for consideration. Option one is to renew the DP and land exchange agreement and basically grant a 2-year extension as requested, while option two is to not renew them. In summary, a staff analysis concludes that renewing them or extending them is recommended because the form and character guidelines haven't changed and the criteria hasn't changed. And the land exchange agreement is based on the form and character and outlines how the site can be prepared for development. However, because a few years have passed since that initial DP was authorized, staff are recommending getting an updated landscape estimate for the landscaping, and then updating the purchase price for the airspace parcel. Now, if this committee prefers option two, which is to not extend it, this would mean the developer would have to come back with a revised design, and staff would request some direction on what that design would look like and how it could more closely align with the form and character guidelines. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Director of Planning. I'd also like to acknowledge that Clifford Sutton just joined us. Hi, Cliff, are you there? Oh, it looks like it's connecting to audio, so he's not connected quite yet. Hi, Cliff, are you joining us?
Yeah, I think I've got my audio connected.
Great.
Let me see if I can get my video.
All right, thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, sorry, I was late. I had trouble with the link.
No problem. Okay, so the Director of Planning just ran through the report on the George Hotel and Residences request for an extension of the form and character permit. Can I get a motion to receive that report, please? Councillor Kroll, Councillor DeAndrade, all in favor? Excellent, thank you. Okay, well, let's open it up for discussion. Well, I'll just open it up for discussion first of all. Does anyone want to take a first crack at this? Okay, well, I'll jump in first of all. Sorry, Mayor Beamish, you're silent for some reason, but your mute is not on.
I'm there.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay, so before we get started, then I'll just jump in. We received a correspondence regarding the bylaw, and I was wondering if you could elaborate on that for us. I'm confused how to open up my email. If I do this, what happens to do you still see me if I go to my Outlook? Does anyone, I don't know what happens technically.
We can still see
here
as long as your video is on.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I'm just going to open up this email. Sorry. Do apologize here. If anyone else wants to, it's hard with all this technology. Where did it go? Well, sorry, where's that email?
Well, you're looking, Chair,
Yes,
can I speak?
Yes, please.
Yeah, let me just speaking to the issue and speaking to the request. I'm not in favor of a 2-year extension. This project has gone on a long time, although I do appreciate and that the prior councils, I guess, have dealt with it. And it has gone through a number of challenges. It's been dealt with appropriately and lawfully, as far as I'm concerned, by the prior councils. But I'm just concerned that it has not gotten off the ground, and we are left with a construction site fenced in Lower Gibsons, which is not an attractive site at all, and that For me, a 2-year extension does not give any incentive to the owner or the developer to move forward at this time. I'm not sure what an extension, quite frankly, would do. I mean, it's going to be 2 to 3 years, even if he started construction tomorrow, before before the building would be completed. So that means that if we have a 2-year extension and it drags that whole 2 years, it'll be another 2 years beyond that. I would throw out to council that I would be in favor of considering a 1-year extension, up to 1-year extension, provided that the site is cleaned up, that the fencing is taken down, and that some landscaping is put in place so that it does not look like a barren construction site. That the waterfront trail that exists right now from the marina to that property and then up around that property, some effort be made to extend that waterfront trail safely to link it to Weingarten Park so that we can actually have part of the amenity that was promised in the many years ago in that project. And that I'm also concerned with where we are with respect to granting the owner of the property agreeing to step aside from the water lot so that development could occur. We haven't seen the decision that I'm aware of from the Ministry of from the province on that issue, but I would like to set that aside if that were possible at this time, until such time as we again have movement forward on this project. This project is lying dormant. It's been too long. I would like to see within the year that the developer come back with a different project, perhaps on a smaller scale, revised, something that he can actually get financed, get funded, and move forward with. That seems to be a big part of the problem is how do you fund that side of the project. So I personally am not in favor of a 2-year extension at this time. 4 years of development permit to me at this stage has been long enough, especially for such a high profile site and such an important project. I agree the project is important to our community from an economic sense, both for an economic driver, which we're going to badly need, and jobs, which we will badly need. But I just feel that the developer has had time to move this project forward and has not done so. So that's my words at this time. I'm happy to listen to others.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Beamish. I did find the email I was looking for. I apologize. It's hard working off of this format. We received an email as part of the community correspondence on the development permit, the section 5.2 lapse of application. In the event that an application made pursuant to this bylaw is number 1, year-old or older, and has been inactive for a period of 6 months or greater. Can you speak to our bylaw on applications lapsing, Director of Planning? I could continue to read it out if you want, but I don't know if it would be better for you to speak to it.
Sure. I guess we've been very slowly working with this developer on moving this project forward. We do have that clause for lapse of permits, and this was issued for a 2-year term. So this development permit has the 2-year term before it lapses. And so he has applied within that term to basically amend the permit to extend it. So we wouldn't consider the DP as a lapsed permit unless the 2-year term is expired. So I believe it goes to June 1st. So as of June 1st, the permit would lapse.
Okay, but it says, according to our bylaw, it says in the cases of an amendment application, the corporate officer will place, in the case of an amendment application, the corporate officer will place an agenda meeting council a motion to rescind.
That would be for a bylaw, for like a zoning amendment, for example. If a zoning amendment is basically, if there's no movement on it and no action on it, then we would lapse it. So we did lapse Sea Glass, for example. That was a zoning amendment application that came in and there was no action on it. So we lapsed that permit, and then we'd bring forward the bylaws to rescind them. In this case, the zoning is through, the zoning was approved. So the zoning can't lapse, it runs with the land forever. but the development permit itself has a 2-year time frame.
Right. And we don't have, it has a 2-year time frame and it's already been renewed.
It's been renewed once, and now he's applying to extend it again. So he's applied for an amendment to it to extend it.
And our bylaw says it can be renewed for 2 years.
Yes, we could renew it for 2 years, or council could renew it could reduce that term to 1 year.
Okay, thank you. Do others have any comments? Following Mary, Councillor DeAndrade.
Thank you, Chair Ladwig. I have, I think my big concern with this project regards the climate change data that was used to make the predictions for whatever foreshore impact and the elevations of the building. This permit was issued in 2016. And in the best scenario, the projections were taken by the IPCC report from 2014 about sea level. It is most likely that was 2011 because there's a report that talks about that, but let's see, best scenario 2014. It has been already 6 years until this project takes off, from the ground. It could be another 8 years. Since 2016, there has been studies done. There was a study that came up in 2016 by the Conto and Pollard that predicted 2.5 sea level rise due to the instability of the Antarctic, some understanding of how the ice sheets behave that they didn't have before. There was another, in 2017, NOAA, which is the National Oceanic Atmosphere Administration, published a graphic. Anyone can go on the website, which they take into account the study that I just cited. In 2019, there was a study that was published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Science in the USA, which is a prestige paper. And again, they talk about that a global total sea level rise exceeding 2 meters, which is twice the upper value put forward by the IPCC. So the IPCC that I refer is the 5th report. There's a 6th report coming in 2021 with new data. So since whatever the design was based in data, that has been a lot of modeling and different understanding of how sea level would occur. So I don't feel particularly comfortable in approving a project that next year, different data can come that the impacts of in the foreshore, for example, will be way beyond what we predicted. So this is one aspect of the project, obviously. But I think this is an important one. I think climate change is a big issue. Council just created the Chief Resilience Officer position that will be executed by our CAO, given the extent of the project, the problem. This hotel, obviously, the size of the hotel, there will be huge impacts. We don't even know if after the studies, after the new predictions, the location will be adequate. So to approve to give another year, to me, doesn't make sense. We're in the midst of an economic meltdown. Nobody knows what's going to happen. We don't understand what's happening with this pandemic. We can be excited with talks about opening business. A big wave of pandemic can come back. We already understand that. So if the developer had a lot of difficulty getting funding in an atmosphere that was really favorable for, getting loans and getting partners, I think now it won't be. So given an extension of 1 year, it doesn't make sense to me. I think there's so many lack of understanding about climate change and about the foundation and the impacts on the aquifer. And I think it will be wise to wait for the new report to come forward anyway before we support that.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Chair Ludwig. Listening to what Councillor Donvetti was saying, if we're faced with a 2.5 meter rise in sea levels, we've got a lot larger problems than this project. So I would suspect that, and you know, it's not like we're approving this to start construction tomorrow with what was proposed in a couple of years ago. I would suspect, as there aren't construction drawings for the project yet, that once funding is in place, that a lot of things are going to be revisited with respect to the project. So it's not like he's going to start digging in a year's time. With respect to the funding, a lot of people are saying, you know, he hasn't been able to get funding. My understanding is that the developer has had funding in place on several occasions, and he's lost it due to legal challenges that have been brought against both the town and the project. So to say he hasn't been able to get funding is not true. He's had funding in place and he's lost it on several occasions. The bigger concern I have is, you know, we are on very uncertain economic sort of footings going forward. And I think to suddenly, for a project that town staff have spent so much time on, that there has been so much effort to put in, to suddenly say, no, it's done, finished, kaput, is not the greatest message to be giving to the commercial development community for a town that's going to be looking for investment. We might as well just sort of say closed for business. You know, I'm in agreement with Mayor Beamish that what I would like to see is the permits being extended and that we get reports back from the developer on a regular basis as to where he's at and how things are progressing. I think it would help with transparency with the project. A lot of people have said a lot has happened behind closed doors, which is unfortunate. So I think, you know, to give the extension is reasonable considering all the work that has been put into the project. With respect to connecting the existing seawall to across the old Hyack site, I think that would be lovely if it can be done. It's always been, the connection has never been there. It's always been you had to stop at the stream, go up through Weingarten Park and come back down Wynn Road, which, you know, is awkward, and having to go through sort of an underway construction site, yeah, is not ideal. If something could be done along that line, I think it would be great. I tried to have a look at the site to see how much would be involved, and you know, it's not just, you know, open a gate and put in a path. It's a little more complicated than that, but you know, not an unreasonable request. But I personally I'm in favor of giving him the extensions with appropriate reporting back from the developer as to how things are progressing.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Kroll. Councillor Lumley.
I have a question first. Is the extension, and maybe for Director of Planning or the CAO, is the extension length of the extension, is this like a one-time extension, or could it come back again and get extended again, or like, do you have to give it 2 years now? Do you have to give it, you know, can you give it 1 year and then extend it again after that year? Like, what would what's the procedural, or what's possible?
I can answer that. Okay, through the chair. So the 2-year extension was a request from the developer. So in the letter, he specifically asked for a 2-year extension. And the land exchange agreement is an agreement between the town and the developer. So he could come in and ask for an extension anytime or to any date, essentially. The form and character development permit has a 2-year lapse date. So he's basically asking to renew it for another 2 years. After that, he could come back again and ask for another extension or another amendment. And assuming the design guidelines, the form and character guidelines haven't changed, the interpretation, the staff's interpretation is that it still meets the forming character. Unless we change the forming character guidelines, then at that point we might say, okay, well, the guidelines have changed and we'd like this design to meet this new guideline.
Okay. I think I'm not muted. You guys can hear me? Okay.
Yes.
I can hear what the mayor's saying. I'm more inclined to give it the 2-year extension, like to go with this staff recommendation, only because the next period of time, which we don't know how long it's going to be due to this pandemic, could seriously cut into a 1-year extension. So I'd be for that, and simply declining it, I think would just, yeah, I agree with Councillor Kroll. It would just send a completely wrong message to our community, our business community, and to anybody else that's going to try to invest in the town. Imagine, just ending this during a pandemic. I just think that sends a wrong message. I'm just not that kind of person. As far as the Councillor DeAndretti's comments, I know that the planning stage for the seawall was quite extensive with impacts of rising tides. I mean, that can be, I mean, if you wanted to put that in as a condition to meet updated guidelines for that. I know the actual size of it, like if you look at the plans, it's like way above the Weingarten Park. And like Councillor Kroll said, if we're worried about this, I mean, we've got so bigger worries to take care of. And of course, those are going to take taxes. And of course, we need a tax base. So which this hotel and residences we're going to ultimately give the town. So there's a number of reasons. And it's an economic driver. And I can't see just pulling the plug at this point. And I agree, like, updates would be nice. Transparency would be nice. We could get, quarterly updates from the developer saying, here's where I am, because there's so much rumor and innuendo out there all the time. Nobody knows. And I'm sure you guys, like I do, get asked all the time. And I say, well, I don't know. So maybe some updates, tide level restriction or something like that, I'd be totally for. But I think at this time, I think I'd like to give them a 2-year extension, and which would probably be the last, I would imagine. If it doesn't happen within then, it just doesn't happen. So those are my 2 thoughts.
Thank you, Councillor Lumley. Before I go over to you, Councillor Kroll, I just want to check in with our community committee members. Scott or Cliff, do either of you? I see Scott's hand up first.
Yeah, thank you. Good comments, everyone. I think, and I'm pretty much in agreement with the mayor. I mean, I think an extension sounds good as long as there could be a bit of a quid pro quo, and that we're getting at least something back to make the site a little bit better. A crossing would be great, but take the fencing down, and it's something that a lot of us see and look at all the time. And if the extension were just given without getting at least something back, I think that would be a shame. I'm wondering too if there's a possibility to put a moratorium on the request for extensions. If we're able to do that, there's some way to make that condition to where a future council can actually continue, increasing the requests. If there's a way to do that, that would be ideal. So those are my comments.
Okay, thank you, Scott. Cliff?
Yeah, I'm actually going to probably just end up echoing most of what Scott had to say. I'm somebody who walks by that site basically every day, and my frustration, and one I think I've shared with my neighbors, is that the condition of that site, both that it's unsightly and it's this block in your walk down to, say, the marina or kind of the other side of town. As far as the length of the extension, I mean, I'm worried that you give them 2 years and it still sits there doing nothing for 2 more years. I mean, I know how controversial this project has been in the past, but as far as I'm concerned, I'm new to and being involved in it at this level. Like, it's all in the past. I'm just really eager to see something move forward. If we can get, access through the seawalk. I think that'd be a great exchange, but really in general, anything to make that site look better. And I'd be happy to give an extension. That being said, the length, I think is best left up to you guys to maybe figure out. I think there's an argument for a longer one, but I also can see the wisdom in sort of saying like, look, if you can't get it together a year from now, you seriously maybe need to rethink the nature of this project. But everything being so volatile right now, I easily see it as a very, very fair request to have some time to sort of, figure out what the future might look like. But if he doesn't know what it is in a year, I mean, how's he going to know 2 years? I don't know. Those are my thoughts.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Okay, so I haven't spoken yet, so I guess I will. I'm leaning towards Mayor Beamish's recommendation as well. I think 3 years to get the financing in place is reasonable. And I recognize that there has been, financial difficulties right now because of COVID-19, but COVID-19 kicked in about a month ago and we hadn't broken ground yet. And I too would like to see this site cleaned up. I know that the community is wanting to see, we've had letters of complaints that there's a number of sites kind of sitting there in this state of limbo and people are getting frustrated with that. We do have a number of other developments in town that have managed to get approval and are moving forward and haven't taken anywhere near the length of time this one has. And I just think it's time that we kind of put a cap on it. And so I agree with Mayor Beamish. I'm leaning towards Mayor Beamish's recommendation for 1 year. And I think having updates along the way would be nice. And I agree that having the site cleaned up so that people don't have to walk by this fence all the time and see it in the current condition would be nice as well. So that's my thoughts. I guess everyone now has had a chance to speak. Just a second, Councillor DeAndretti, it is 3:30. We've got 3 different scales of thought here. Okay, all right, Councillor DeAndretti and then Councillor Kroll.
Okay. I would like to, even if the proponent decides to put a shovel on the ground next year, so his project goes ahead, is it still an old project regarding climate change data? So I would like to put a condition that the data has to be revisited. This is a big project, and by the time he finished constructing, it's another 3 years, so it could be another 4 years. We have to have a better understanding because the data is changing as we speak. If the data remains similar, then we have more confidence that the drawings are okay for our foreshore. But I'm concerned of future impacts on the foreshore just because of the radical change, for scientists to say, well, it's actually double. We are talking about another extra meter or extra meter and a half in the world. So, I mean, these are big variables. We're not talking about just 10 centimeters, which already could play a big impact. So I think we have to be responsible because we put in our strategic planning, environmental responsibility. We just created a position for climate, for resilience. And if we leave this, I think it doesn't make sense. So I would like to put as a condition that if he starts the project in 1 year, that there has to be, and especially that next year we expect the IPCC report, and we can do a comparison. And I would urge that the town of Gibsons engage in a study like that too. We have to have better data. Our study about our foreshore impact is old already.
Okay, thank you. Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair. So just to speak to Councillor DeAndretti's comments, the geotech report would be required anyway. It is a condition of the build. And when we get to that point, it would have to be updated and validated by a geotechnical engineer. That we would do that through the geotechnical development permit process. So that is a separate process, as well as any impacts to the aquifer that is looked at the time when we have the detailed plans, and that is through a different development permit process as well. So even as data is changing and standards are changing and standards are getting updated with flood construction levels and sea level rise, that is why we have these permits that lapse after 2 years. And that's why we have an option to make amendments to them. So when we get to the point where they start building the development, they would have to have that report and have it updated to the appropriate standard. But yeah, so that would happen for any development in a geotechnical hazard area, so along the marine shoreline, and that is a separate process to this process in front of us today.
Okay, thank you. Hold on, Mayor Beamish. Councillor Kroll had his hand up, and then I think I'll give it to Mayor Beamish, and then we need to wrap it up just in cognizant of time. So, Councillor Kroll.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to comment in the correspondence that we received on a lot of it was sort of contingent on issues that had come up in former court challenges. One of the pieces of correspondence that we did receive was the letter from Scredo. And the developer has been working with Scredo to, to ensure that this project aligns with the economic recovery of the community. I think which is a key factor. The other thing, and perhaps the Director of Planning can correct me on this, part of this project has been contingent on the transfer of the waterfront lease. And it was my understanding that that was sort of impacting on the timeline of the project. And because of challenges against that, there were issues there. So, and my understanding is that still hasn't been resolved. So, that could take another 6 months to resolve, which stalls them. So I, sort of agreeing with Councillor Lumley, I'm prepared to give him the 2 years on the proviso that we get updated reports on how things are progressing and that, some efforts are made to improve the site.
Okay, thank you for that. One more comment from Mayor Beamish, just because he already had his hand up before.
I think one of the questions that arose, I'm not sure if Scott raised it, but it was a question of whether or not we could put a kind of a final decision, 1 year or 2 years and no more. We can't actually fetter future council's decision making on that, so that we couldn't put that in place. He would have the right to come back. The developer would have the right to come back before the 1 year is up and request another extension, provided, in my view, provided he can show progress towards the development actually being done. That would be what I would be looking for a further request. So I'm still, my view, 1 year. I understand the importance economically of this project to the town. I do. And that's why I wish it was already here. But if we don't give some incentive to get this project moved forward, then I think that we'll be 2 years from now, we'll still be here. We'll be debating this again. And I think that I would rather be a year from now having a solid plan and saying, okay, it's going to cut ground in 6 months and here's where we are, or it's already started. So I still come back to clean up the site, show some good faith towards us and the community, clean the site up, take the fencing down. You might have to fence around the oil tank if that's necessary. If a boardwalk or something could be put in place to run the walkway, connect the walkway, that would be great, because that's what people really want to see. And that's been a long time promise of this project. And also to follow through with the airspace parcel recalculation and other things recommended by staff. Now, that being said, we don't have to make this decision today. This decision go forward to the next council meeting, and staff could have a chance to talk to the developer and say, are these things possible? Are these terms agreeable to you? And then they could come back to us and say, okay, these are the agreement terms that we have that we would consider in extending this project for another year, or for some councilors 2 years. But I think we need to push this project forward in some sense. And as I say, if in that year comes back and says he's got a real plan to move forward, quarterly reports are ideal. I agree with Councillor Kroll on that as well.
Okay, thank you. I said I was going to cut
Those are
off,
my thoughts. Thank you.
but I will give Councillor Lumley one last comment here.
Okay, I'm going to agree with the mayor on the last part of his comment, which was we don't have enough information right now to make this decision. I know it sounds dreamy to put a path in, but like we'd have to get some reports back from planning or engineering. I mean, like a waterfront path, like would the province not get involved in that? And I mean, who knows? That might take a year to get approvals to put a path through. So maybe we just don't have enough information right now. If people aren't just willing to accept it without conditions or put a small period of time on it, maybe it should come back to the next committee of the whole or planning meeting, and then with just a little bit more information, I guess, and thoughts from the developer. So I think that would be the best, would be to refer this to the next one.
Director of Planning.
Just a note on the waterfront walkway. I'm looking at the development agreement, and it is a condition of occupancy. So they would have to get their building permit. They would have to substantially start construction and get to the point of occupancy. And that's when the town would get the waterfront walkway. So the land exchange agreement is a very preliminary step. So it's the subdivision stage, basically, and the statutory right-of-way stage. So it's a very early step in the development process. It would have to be authorized and allowed in order for them to go ahead and even get a building permit and then begin the work and then put in that waterfront walkway. That's based on the development agreement that was agreed to between the town and the developer.
Thank you for that. Okay, well, we have two recommendations before us. And then, of course, we have the option to amend or create our own recommendation. So do we want to just walk through and vote on each one and until we settle on something that hopefully we can all agree with, or at least majority? So having said that, the Planning and Development Committee recommends that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to issue an amendment to Development Permit DP 2018-05 for the George Hotel and Residencies, extending the lapse date to June 1st, 2022, 48 months from the date of issuance, subject to an updated landscape estimate. Does someone want to move that? Councillor Kroll will move that. Councillor Lumley will move that. Councillor Kroll seconds it. All in favor? Okay, so that is defeated. The next one.
Well, you got to.
Right. Sorry, I
Sorry,
thought that.
Chair, you have to ask for opposed.
Oh, sorry. What do I do? Ask for those opposed. Right. Sorry.
Yep.
Okay. Those opposed. All right. Thank you.
I'm opposed.
Okay. Thank you. Do we want to? Does someone want to move? We'll work down the list from scale. Mayor Beamish, do you want to make a recommendation for 1 year?
I'd make a recommendation for a 12-month extension from the 1st of June for 12 months.
Okay. Does someone want to second that? Sorry, I see Lindsay's camera on, which must mean something.
No,
So-
no, I'm just ready to jump in if you need some help with the resolutions.
Okay, thank you. So there's a motion on the floor from Mayor Beamish. Does someone second that? Councillor Kroller, is this a question or are you?
I was going to suggest an amendment to what Mayor Beamish was saying, is a 12-month extension from the point at which he gets a decision on the foreshore lease.
No.
Corporate officer?
The amendment cannot be moved to be, or sorry, the motion cannot be moved to be amended until it is seconded.
Right, right. Sorry, give me 1 sec. My phone is ringing. Let me turn this off. Okay, I will second the Mayor Beamish's motion. All in favor, or are there others in favor?
Councillor Cole can amend it now, right?
Yes. So
Right. Okay. So just to be clear, so that it looks like that's passed, right? 4 out of.
Oh, we are, okay, I'm in favor of Mayor Beamish's motion.
I'm-
12,
Okay, sorry, Councillor or Corporate Officer.
Sorry, just a clarification on process. Once a motion is moved and seconded, it's then open for discussion, at which point somebody can move an amendment for it, which can then be voted on, and then you would have the final vote.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. So now Councillor Crowell has made a suggestion to amend it to.
Well, the amendment and suggestion I was proposing was that it be a 12-month extension once a decision on the foreshore lease has been determined. Because the project is contingent on that. And if, you know, a huge component of the project is the gas dock. And if that whole foreshore thing goes away with the gas dock, we've got another huge community problem, because Gibsons will go off the map if we don't have a fuel dock.
Mayor Beamish.
Yeah, I disagree with that. The gas dock already exists and it's already on its own license of occupation from the province. So it's not going to go anywhere. The additional of the foreshore lease was the lease was an addition to that project. It exists without that. And so I would not be in favor of that motion myself.
Councillor Crowell.
The developer owns the gas dock, so he may choose, if the project
Yeah.
doesn't go forward, to close the gas dock. There would be
Okay.
no reason for it to
You may
exist.
choose
if he
that.
decided to close it.
Yeah, good. Okay, so Councillor Crowell made a motion. Does anyone want to second that motion? Sorry, Corporate Officer.
I just wanted clarification, Councillor Cole, that that was a motion and not discussion.
It was a motion to amend Mayor Beamish's
Motion.
motion.
Does anybody second Councillor Crowell's amendment? Councillor Lumley. Are others in favor? Corporate Officer?
At this point, if you call a vote for all in favor, followed by a vote for all opposed.
Okay, all in favor? Okay, oh, we got 3 in favor, all opposed. Okay, so that amendment doesn't move forward. So now are we back to Mayor Beamish's motion then, as was?
Yes, the amendment was defeated. And so Mayor Beamish's motion, moved by Chair Ladwig for a 1-year extension, is still on the table.
Okay, so all in favor of that motion? 5 in favor, so that passes. Opposed? Councillor Lumley and Councillor Grohl. Okay, thank you. So then do I move on to further that? The mayor and corporate officer be authorized to issue an amendment to the land exchange agreement to extend the completion date to June 1st, 2020. Should I walk through this as well?
I would recommend that you do, while making the change, if you're moving it, to bring it in line with the previous motion, and that would be 2021 instead of 2022.
But do I need to go through the process of reading out the 2022? I do, because.
No, this is simply a recommendation from staff. So somebody does need to move it. If you choose to move it with different language, that's fine.
Okay, so then I'm going to move further that the mayor and corporate officer be authorized to issue an amendment to the land exchange agreement to extend the completion date to June 1st, 2021, subject to an updated purchase price for the airspace parcel. So I will move that. Does someone want to second it? Councillor DeAndrade seconded it. In favor? Myself. Okay.
Discussion.
Oh, sorry. Okay, sorry. Correct. Discussion, Councillor Lumley.
Yeah, what would the, if he's only getting a year, like, and I mean, is there a reason where we just can't extend it without going through the, you know, the process of updating like a market, getting a market valuation and going through all that? Like what would the point of that be?
If it's just 1 year, you mean?
We already voted on this, I think a year ago. Anyway, I just don't, I mean, we, you know, you guys just voted to give the guy 1 year extension. I'm not sure what the purpose would be for putting all that work into an evaluation again, when the amounts are probably going to be like minuscule, like the difference is going to be like so little. I just don't understand. So
No, that is a good point. Thank you for reading that. He makes a good point. Councillor Crowell.
Sort of going along with what Councillor Lumley was saying, is because of the state of the economy, they're talking property values in Vancouver and other areas are down 30%. So, you know, we may even take a huge hit on what's already been negotiated going out for another evaluation.
We probably would. Good chance of that anyway. I think Councillor Lumley makes a good point. It is only 1 year. If I rescind my motion, no.
Sorry. The motion has currently been moved and seconded, and
Okay.
discussion is taking place. So I would recommend a vote at this point, and if it is defeated, then you can put a new motion on the floor.
What if I myself, even though I made the motion, want to come back on myself?
No, if you were the original mover, you can't oppose it.
Right, okay. Mayor Beamish.
Back to the Director of Planning. When was that calculation made? Was that calculation made prior to the original permit being issued? That would be 4 years ago. So is it that old now, or is it fresher than that?
I don't have the date in front of me. I believe it was made at the time the land exchange agreement was first executed. The CAO might be able to speak better to that, but I believe it's about 4 years old.
Yeah, that's through Chair Laduk, that's correct. That's those dates. The Wynn Road was valued at I believe around 425,000. The air parcel is based on a percentage of the value of that road, and that's a sort of a valuation precedent that comes from the Canada line and so on. So it's a percentage of that. Off the top of my head, well, whatever that number is, 61,000, I think is around 15% of 425. But that was the last time that was done.
Thank you.
Okay, so I made the motion. Someone's seconded it, right? Councillor Crowell?
Councillor DeAndrade.
Oh, DeAndrade seconded it. And that was to 2021, correct?
Yes. And the rest
Yes.
is written.
The rest as written. Councillor Lumley?
we just not amend the motion to just disregard the evaluation, but to grant the extension of the current agreement? So I put that motion forward to amend the motion that's on the table to not to include the valuation. However you want to word that.
Okay, I'll second that.
So that's moving it to 2021 and without the reference to the evaluation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I've seconded it. Further discussion on that? No. Okay, all in favor? Okay. So that's unanimous. All right, thank you for that. Okay, Mayor Beamish. Mayor Beamish?
I'd like to make further resolution, and that is that the developer be directed to remove the fencing and improve the site as it is until such time as construction on the site actually begins.
Can I just ask a question about the fencing? Wasn't he instructed to put the fencing up for safety? Like, wasn't he told to? Director of planning?
At that time, I believe they were doing testing, they were doing drilling and doing a number of things on the site. Now that's not being done, and in the absence of any work being done on the site, it's unsightly as far as I'm concerned. And the fencing should be down, and it should be cleaned up, and some even landscaping improvements be put on it so that it actually appears as a good vacant lot in the waterfront of the town. Fencing maybe around the oil tanks, maybe all that's required down there.
Okay, just playing devil's advocate. What if all of a sudden he got his financing next month and he wanted to start doing work on it? We just told him to take the fencing now, and now he's got to put the fencing up. Like, I don't know.
Yeah,
I feel like for 1 year.
I'm not hearing that from the developer that he's. Yeah.
Sorry, I keep getting.
Sorry,
Sorry, things are cutting
my
out.
interest. Yeah.
I didn't hear that.
My internet bandwidth is low here, but my sense is that I'd like to see that site improved while there's nothing being done on it.
Okay, so you made a motion. Would you mind repeating that? That the fencing be removed and the site be
move the construction fencing be removed and the site be improved, so that it is. There's grass to be cut down. There's weed trees growing on the site, and this needs to be improved and in terms of its appearance, unsightly appearance.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, Councillor DeAndretti seconds it. In favor?
Any discussion?
Discussion? Mayor Beamish?
No, sorry, I was voting. I was not sure where you were, so yeah.
Okay, Councillor Kroll?
Okay.
Just sort of the issue you raised, Chair Ladwig, about, I think it was the town's request that the fencing go up. Perhaps the appearance of the fencing could be improved. People being people, they're going to take the path of least resistance across cutting diagonally across a property. There's potential liability issues, but I certainly appreciate what Mayor Beamish is saying. But I think there are ways that the look of the site can be improved. But I think safety has to be the prime concern.
Okay, my thoughts on it personally is, it's 1 year. We've already reduced his request. I'm willing to leave it alone for a year and let him try to do his thing. And in a year's time, whatever will be. So I say leave it. That's my thoughts on it personally, but that's just me. So so who we've got, Mayor Beamish has made the motion. Councillor DeAndretti, I believe, seconded it. All in favor? Did we do this already? I apologize if we did. All in favor? Mayor Beamish, Scott, Cliff, Councillor DeAndretti, so that passes. Opposed? Myself, Lumley, and Kroll. Okay. All right. Well, I think that sums up the DPA 5 extension. Okay, let me just thank you everyone for that. Oh, Mayor Beamish.
I guess I'm still interested in seeing if the pathway could be extended across there. And I hear what people are saying, that it's part of the construction, but you can go in there and put a gravel pathway that people could access or through there. I think it'd be a nice gesture on the part of the developer to do that at this point in time. If he's even looking at 2 years before he could do anything on that site, he's going to have to come back to us again in a year. But looking at the possibility of putting a pathway through there, I think it should be investigated. And it's his property essentially, as it goes through there. And he could, I think that looking at an improvement there would be a real asset to the town, and I think people would welcome that opportunity. I think we should request that. Maybe we're not directed in a resolution, but if we can ask staff to suggest that is town council's interested in seeing if that could be done.
Councillor Kroll?
You know, I love the idea of there was never access through there. And it was something that the project was going to bring to the community was a continuation of the seawalk. The bigger concern I see is if the path is established and he does get the green light to start construction, the path is going to have to be closed. And I think, you know, to give people a carrot and then yank it away is almost sort of like a slap across the face. You know, perhaps if it's not going to be a huge expense and it can be done in a, you know, easy manner, great. But, you know, it is going to be lost during a construction period. And I think that's going to be more annoying to people once they've become used to it being there. It never has been there.
So Mayor Beamish, are you making a motion to request the developer put a path through?
I'd like to make a motion, request staff to investigate that with the developer, see if that's possible. I mean, you know, this project could still be a few years away from being done, or it could never be done. Who knows? But I think it's valuable to try to do these things. The town needs to start benefiting from this site, and I think that that's one way that we could show people would then see also the value of having it in the future. If it's there as temporary, it's shown as temporary, it's built temporary, and then they'll look forward to it being completed when the project is done. If we have to take it down, so.
Okay, so does somebody want to second Mayor Beamish's request?
So
Sorry, Mayor Beamish, were you gonna say something?
no, I'm just going to say that. I'd just make that motion that staff be directed to negotiate or discuss that with the developer.
Okay, and I saw Councillor DeAndrade seconded that. Can I get a motion all in favor? I'll support that, sure. Okay, that passes. All in favor, great, thank you. Okay, can we move on? All right, we're running a little behind schedule here, so I shouldn't be surprised. Next report is 3.2. Again, over to the Director of Planning on the short-term rental bylaws for consideration.
Thank you, Chair Ladwig. So this report presents 3 amendment bylaws that would regulate short-term rentals and seeks validation or confirmation that this is what has been requested. So the 3 bylaw amendments are to the zoning bylaw to regulate the use, the business license bylaw to regulate the business, and the notice of enforcement bylaw to regulate enforcement of short-term rentals. So what is allowed now is basically a bed and breakfast use, which generally allows 1 to 2 bedrooms to be rented in a dwelling, but not in a secondary suite, and must be conducted by a resident in the same dwelling, and must provide at least 1 parking space and breakfast. What's actually happening is the town had issued 46 business licenses for short-term rentals, none of which conform to the bed and breakfast regulations, and most are located within secondary suites and some in accessory buildings. So in October and November last year, the town held 4 community dialogues and launched a survey which received 91 responses. 63% were from residents and 37% were from operators. What we heard was that short-term rentals support the local economy through tourism. They provide supplemental income and mortgage support, which increases affordability for buyers. There is a need for clear regulation so operators can operate responsibly. There is a desire to maintain neighborhood character and minimize impacts to neighbors. and there is support for hosted short-term rentals. So during the community consultation, the feedback was most divided on measures aimed at addressing the long-term housing supply, the long-term rental housing supply. Following that, a report was brought to council seeking direction on next steps, and council directed staff to draft bylaws to allow short-term rentals on hosted properties only, which means that a resident has to be on the site during a guest stay. So what is proposed? The zoning amendment introduces a number of new definitions and essentially merges bed and breakfasts with short-term rentals. So what it would be is essentially a furnished rental for a short period of time, so for less than 30 days. The operator must reside on site. Not more than one unit can be used for a short-term rental at a time. So on a property that has, say, a single family dwelling and a secondary suite and a garden suite, they would only be allowed to use one of those units as a short-term rental. One parking space would be required for every 2 bedrooms. So if there's a larger property and has more on-site parking, then they would be allowed to rent more bedrooms. So it would be based on what they could provide. And because an operator is on site, this opens up to allowing short-term rentals in secondary suites, in garden suites, and in accessory buildings. The business license bylaw would require an annual $200 business license fee, the operator's contact information, number of sleeping units or bedrooms, a parking plan, and if it's in a duplex or a townhouse, strata council approval, and then a safety attestation form, which would authorize that they had installed smoke alarms and fire extinguishers and met fire safety considerations and safety considerations. The enforcement bylaw would include a number of violations and ticketing with fees starting, well, between $200 and $300. So if one would be to refuse entry for inspection. So if there would be a complaint on the property and town staff needed to attend to do an inspection, if that is refused, then we could ticket for $300 for that. If they're not complying with the business license terms, it's a $200 ticket. Advertising with more bedrooms than approved through the business license is another $200. Operating contrary to zoning, operating more than one dwelling unit at the same time, operating without a business license, or not meeting parking requirements. So those are all the enforcement tickets that could be issued. So this hasn't had a legal review yet, and this was brought forward to basically get some feedback on whether this is the approach that that we heard, whether this is the right direction. And if it is, then the next step would be to send this for legal review before bringing it back for first and second reading.
Okay, thank you, Director of Planning.
No problem.
Motion to receive the report. Councillor Kroll, Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Great. Open for discussion. Mayor Beamish.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent report, and I appreciate that. And the only thing I couldn't find the Director of Planning, either in the bylaw or in the bylaw, is the referral to the reference to the 100-meter notice for short-term rental accommodation. Should that be in the bylaw, or does that exist already in another bylaw that we don't have to repeat it? Or I thought it'd be useful to have that as kind of evidence of either in the application that they have evidence of that referral having been done, or it be in the bylaws a requirement. So I didn't know where that needed to be.
Is that a referral, like a 100-meter notice to neighbors that a short-term rental is operating, or is that or was that for the zoning amendment process? What is the intent of that 100-meter referral?
We have it in the report. It's on page 2. And it refers to short-term rental accommodation regulations. The notification distance for short-term rental accommodation would be 100 meters.
All right. Yeah. So that was put out to the short-term. Well, that was put out to the community consultation, or at the community consultation, and was discussed in the dialogues. And the feedback received was that short-term rental operators didn't want to share their personal information to that many neighbors. And in response, what we've done is put a business license, like a requirement to post your business license on like somewhere on the property where everyone could see it, and have contact information for the operator to manage any complaints that way. But yeah, we could put that back in as a procedure, but there was opposition to it from the community, so we did take it out for that reason.
I like it.
Okay.
I do too. I think it's a great report. Councillor.
Again, I think it's a great report, although I do agree with Mayor Beamish, because I know in some of the other jurisdictions, they are putting a requirement that within a certain radius of the Airbnb, that residents have a contact information for the operator of the premise. So whether it's 100 meters or 50 meters, I think it is important, are you going to go around at 11 o'clock at night when there's a noise complaint with a flashlight looking for a business license posted on a tree? It doesn't. So I think that language of having a buffer zone around the property is very valid, and I would like to see it. I also think, and I don't know whether, again, some of the other jurisdictions, our business license for an Airbnb seems very reasonable, considering a lot of B&Bs are charging in excess of 100, or Airbnbs are charging in excess of $100 a night. So the cost of a business license, I know other areas are charging $400 for a business license.
Do you want me to speak to that?
Sure, go for it.
Okay, so the $200 business license fee was based on the home occupation business license fee that we charge right now. And the requirements to set up a short-term rental are a lot more stringent. Well, we're regulating them quite closely now. So there would be quite a few costs to set up a short-term rental and meet all of our requirements. So for that reason, we just kept that fee the same, but council could increase it, or the planning committee could recommend increasing that annual license fee.
All right, Councillor Kroll.
Just sort of follow up, I as I said, I think it is a very inexpensive business license when you consider the revenue that a lot of these people are generating. I don't know if there's, the other thing that sort of bothers me is if you look on the Airbnb sites, is people say Gibsons, and then you check out the Airbnb and it's actually Langdale or Hopkins or Grantham's. And I said to someone on council recently, it would be nice if we could get business licenses from the people that are using the Gibsons name, as opposed to people that are actually within the town. And I don't know if there's any way through the Airbnb groups that we can in fact legislate that, near Gibsons, close to Gibsons, but the fact that they're saying Gibsons and it's Langdale Heights is, to me is a bit rude.
Well, I think the market has to kind of figure that one out. Councillor DeAndretti.
I agree with Mayor Beamish with regard to having neighbors around 100 radios, because I understand the owner of the house wants privacy, but it is a business. So the moment you are into a business, every business has contact information. So I would like this to go through. I think it's important.
I actually have a question. I'm trying to find it in the bylaw right now, but just so I'm clear, we're saying that it has to be owner occupied. They have to be residing in the building while they're renting out the suite. It has to be the principal residence, and they have to be present while they're renting out their suite. Is that correct, Director of Planning?
Yes, that's correct.
But somewhere in there, did I see something about if they as far as the secondary contact, like, I'm just wondering if there's the way it was worded, there's a bit of a loophole, like they can identify secondary contact and then that, does that person need to be on the premises? Like say you rent out your primary residence while you go away on vacation for 2 weeks and you rent it out as an Airbnb and you've got a secondary contact in the neighborhood. Do they have to come and stay at your house while you're Airbnb-ing it out? Or
Yes, so the way this is written is there has to be a basically a caretaker. Somebody has to be on site. So you wouldn't be able to rent out your place and completely walk away from it.
even
There
for
has to,
even for a couple of weeks or a month or something?
yeah.
Okay. I was just wondering, I just wanted to make sure that loophole wasn't.
If you rented it for more than 30 days, then you don't have to be there.
Right.
So that
yeah.
would be a long-term rental.
Right. Yeah. But you understand what I was getting at.
Yeah.
The point is, if they're operating it as an Airbnb, there needs to be somebody on site. That's my point. Okay.
Yeah.
Councillor DeAndrade.
Just a question for the Director of Planning. Can you confirm that it is a principal residence, right? Because one of the things on the report that you point out, it's interesting because they have, the report that assessed the impacts on long-term rentals. They say one host, one rental, no full-time entire home rentals. Platforms responsible for enforcement. So we are doing the platform. So my understanding that when I read the report that the rent cannot be on the principal residence. Am I correct? The short term.
Well, the way it's written is there has to be a principal resident on the property.
Yes.
So I guess, so in a situation with a single family dwelling with a secondary suite, the secondary suite could be used as a short-term rental, or it could be used as a long-term rental. And if it was somebody's, say the secondary suite, somebody lived in for half of the year, and they could do a short-term rental for the other half. So as long as somebody's on the property, it would allow a short-term rental of the other units.
Yeah. So in other words, I could move into my basement for the summer and Airbnb the rest of my house if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And that would be acceptable as long as I was on the premises.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay, Mayor Beamish. And then I'd like to try to wrap this up just in
Is it my understanding, my hearing that and understanding that is that you could have a carriage house on the property as long as the principal residence is there and you're living in the principal residence, and you could rent out the carriage house as an Airbnb. Is that correct?
Yes, that would be correct.
I understand that. Thank you. I would still like to see the 100-meter notification of neighbors, because a lot of neighborhoods, they really, all of a sudden, there's strangers in the neighborhood. They don't know why, or they don't know from where. At least they know they're associated with the Airbnb down the street, and they have that kind of understanding. So that's why, that's one of the values of that as well, is so that people understand what's happening in their neighborhood.
Okay, that can be added.
Yeah, I'd like to hear from Cliff or Scott. You guys have been, Cliff?
Yeah, I guess start by saying actually I participated in the process, and I would compliment city staff on the thoroughness of it. I attended one of the meetings with my wife, and yeah, felt very listened to, and I think it was a very thoroughly done process. As a consequence, I'm very happy with the regulations as they're written. They generally conform to kind of what I was expecting, having participated. Maybe to address the issues coming up. I mean, I'm kind of indifferent to the notification. I mean, I've been running an Airbnb for a while. All my neighbors know it. I mean, it doesn't really affect me. That being said, I can see how it's useful. Yeah, okay. As for the license fee, I'm very comfortable with it as it is. I think for the type of business it is, for the number of people who run it, it's a very part-time endeavor. I don't see it being an effective strategy to jack that up very much higher. So those would be my only comments.
Okay, thank you, Cliff. Scott?
Yeah, thanks. The great report. I've been watching this one closely. We run an Airbnb as well. I'm not fully in support of the buffer, just because, I mean, for me personally, it is a bit about personal information, and I think it's like a very divisive issue with a lot of people in terms of like, you know, long-term, short-term housing. And I live in a pretty tight-knit neighborhood, and I wouldn't want to welcome that kind of like scrutiny from my neighbors. That said, I mean, anyone could go on the Airbnb website and look at a map and see all of the Airbnbs that are available. So you can get that information pretty easily. I mean, it would be nice if there was a way that the town had a kind of a list of businesses that were operating with an active license on Airbnb. So you can go to a website and look at that information and have it more readily available. And I have to say too, in terms of like the workers' housing, we've had someone who used our Airbnb that was here as working part-time as a security guard, and so that felt a lot better than someone just coming for a holiday or a vacation. And I wish that the town was maybe somehow able to be more proactive in notifying Airbnb housing that they have access to those kinds of people. Maybe there's a conduit to kind of connect those two people together to where we're getting different types of people instead of just people looking for like a getaway from Vancouver. So yeah, those are my comments.
Okay, great, good comments to both of you. Thank you. I'd just like to say before I move on to you, Councillor Kroll, I agree with Scott on the buffer, to be honest. If Scott and Cliff, I guess. If this wasn't owner occupied, I would definitely support a 100-meter buffer. But I think the whole point of getting to a bylaw where the owner is present on site, I think eliminates, it doesn't eliminate, but doesn't make it necessary to go that much further out. If there's complaints so significant enough that it'd be bothering someone 100, it was 100 meters or 100 feet. What were we saying?
Yeah.
I believe it was 100 meters.
However, you know, if they're being so rowdy that it's disturbing neighbors from that far away, I would think the person that lives in the house would probably come and bang on the door long before that would happen. And so I'm comfortable with it, with the notification the way it is, and leave that onus on the person living on site to deal with it. But that's just me. Okay, over to you, Councillor Kroll, and then let's wrap this up and move on to the next report.
Sort of what Scott was referring to, possibly, you know, once bylaws or business licenses have been issued through workforce housing and some of the local businesses, I know Coastal Craft are always looking for short-term rentals for some of their specialty trades coming in for short periods, and it works out really well in that sort of window. The operators give them a bit of a break on the rent. They're not having to pay the commission to Airbnb, so it works well.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we have, let me just pull this up. Sorry, did you want to say something, Director of Planning?
Yeah, I would like to make a motion if we can direct staff or even to see the possibility of having some sort of, because I would like to know how many Airbnbs are around my house, for example. So since the information won't be like distributed, it would be nice to go to the town website and maybe assess the situation, right? Just for Airbnb said for comfort, right? I mean, you see, or whatever, strange people, whatever, you know, it's a quiet neighborhood, but you see people, I mean, people feel, you know, if it's in a more urban, it gets more diluted. But if you're not, I was surprised, frankly, to see even a bunch of Airbnb around where I live. I thought, wow, I didn't realize that. I mean, it has not been an issue, but there was there was some huge noise a while ago with fireworks and stuff. And anyways, I think it's just like a device that people can't understand what's going on, right? If we're gonna regulate, it would be nice if the town, maybe we could go to the town's website. So maybe we can direct staff for that, and we can have okay, in my neighborhood, how many Airbnbs are there? Is it possible? Some sort of a.
Okay, just before I move it over to Director of Planning, you know, there's a map in our report that shows all the Airbnbs in town, right? I'm sure you saw that. Is that what you're talking about? You want to?
Well, I So on this report, but I'm not aware that it is on the website. It is already?
No, I'm not sure about the website, but I just wanted to clarify that's what you're referring to. Okay, Director of Planning.
That's pretty easy to do. We could just put a page on our website with all the business licenses that are issued.
Okay.
And location?
We could do that too.
Perfect. Thank you.
So you're making that motion? Okay, can I walk through the recommendations from staff and then we can do a further that and include your motion there? Is that okay, Corporate Officer? Yeah, okay. Okay, so we've got a recommendation that council, or it should be the Planning and Development Committee directs, hold on, let me read this. The council directs staff to obtain a legal review of the proposed bylaw amendments prior to consideration of first and second readings. Should that not say that the Planning and Development Committee
Recommends council.
recommends council?
It's understood that it's the Planning and Development Committee recommending to council.
Okay, so that doesn't matter. All right. So the recommendation is that council directs staff to obtain a legal review of the proposed bylaw amendments prior to consideration of first and second readings. Can I get a motion for that? Councillor Kroll, seconded by Mayor Beamish. All in favor? Great. And further that we recommend that council direct staff to put a page on our website showing where all the licensed Airbnbs are in town. Is that what you're looking for? Okay.
So anyone can have information, right?
Okay. Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, Mayor Beamish, is there discussion on that? Scott or Cliff, or do you guys, any concerns or discussion? No? Okay, so all in favor? Okay, so that passes. Okay, thanks everyone. I think that closes up that report. Okay, moving on to the next one. Sorry, my internet's a bit slow. Okay, report 3.4 over to Planner 1 regarding the development variance permit and development permit for 721 Wynn Road. So over to you, Katie.
Thank you, Chair. Like we also have the temporary use. That's item 3.3. Do you want to start with that one?
Did I miss it? Sorry, my internet.
No problem.
Sorry. Okay, then yes, let's go with 3.3 then. So this is, sorry, the temporary use permit 2019-03 for a recreational vehicle site at 718 North Road.
That's the one, yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chair Lightweight. So the town has received a temporary use permit application for the property at 718 North Road. The property is located at the corner of Hillcrest and North Road and is zoned C1, which is intended to provide for a range of commercial uses, as well as apartment use above the ground floor. This temporary use permit application looks to allow for an RV park for up to 12 RVs for a maximum of 3 years. The property owner wishes to construct a residential rental building on the site in 3 years' time, and therefore has applied for this temporary use permit for the RV park in the interim. The property used to be the site of the Uptown Motel and Trailer Park, and therefore has 12 hookups on site. When reviewing the application, staff looked at the pad rental rates, which are $450 per month on a month-to-month basis, and this was determined to be affordable. Staff note that there are currently 7 inhabited trailers on the site, with approximately 12 residents, including children. Therefore, staff recommend drafting the proposed temporary use permit with several conditions that have to be met by June 19th, 2020 to enable the TUP to be issued. These conditions are the following. Firstly, to provide for and arrange for fortnightly garbage pickup. Ensure that all outdoor fridge and freezers are placed in wildlife-resistant containers. Provide 24-hour access to laundry facilities on site for all residences. Provide privacy screening along Hillcrest Road. Register a housing agreement on title for the duration of the temporary use permit, which would limit pad rental to $500 per pad per month, and then also provide a $5,000 bond to cover the cost of site remediation. And this would include removal of RVs once the temporary use permit has been expired or has expired. The Local Government Act states that the notice of temporary use permit must be placed in the newspaper for 2 weeks prior to council consideration of the permit, and that neighbours within 50 meters of the property should be notified of the application by mail. So staff recommend proceeding with this step before bringing back public input for council to consider for the final consideration of the temporary use permit application. So I've put all the recommendations are listed on page 1 of the staff report. I believe that Chris Danroth, the property owner, is listening in if you have any questions.
All right, thank you very much, Katie, Planner 1. Motion to receive the report. Councillor Crowell, Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Okay, open for discussion. Okay, Councillor DeAndrade.
I have just a question. I don't have any problem with the project, especially it's temporary. And so I just don't understand the 50 meters rationale, because for short-term rental is 100 and here we are saying 50. So can you clarify? Or
I can. I believe it's in our application procedures bylaw. We have a 50-meter radius, so it comes from there.
okay. I don't know how council feels, but I find funny this 50 meters and 100 for short-term rentals. It's 100. And why? I think this is a similar situation. There will be people living around in different conditions. I don't know. It's a temporary permit. Wouldn't make sense to be 100.
I can speak to that.
You're Director of Planning.
So the 100-meter radius, that was brought up as part of the short-term rental discussion. That was brought forward by you, Councillor DeAndrade, and that was for the purpose of notifying neighbors of a short-term rental. Our procedures bylaw has a 50-meter radius. So when we talked about updating that, it was staff were specifically directed to use the 100 meters just for short-term rentals and not to update the procedure bylaw.
Mayor Beamish.
There's actually a difference between the two. The short-term rental one was one of informing the neighbors of the fact that there is a B&B here or short-term rental here. Temporary use permit is actually for comment, asking people to, if they have any comment on the temporary use permit, they could comment back. So, but we certainly could. I think I'm not sure what we did for marijuana sales, for example, whether we went 100 meters or if that's still just 50. We certainly could update our bylaw and require 100 meters on that process, but they were two different things. One was informing. This one is actually requesting feedback if anybody cares to comment on the application.
Councillor Lumley.
I'd like to move all 4 recommendations.
Okay, I would like to make a comment. Once we move it, is discussion over?
Nope. No,
Okay.
you invite discussion.
I'll second it, none discussion.
Okay, Councillor Lumley's moved it. Oh, corporate officer.
Sorry, I was just going to jump in. The mayor beat me to it. If it's moved and seconded, the next step is discussion and then a vote in favor and opposed.
Okay, thank you.
Second.
Okay, Mayor Beamish seconds it. I'll jump in for a little bit more discussion. How do we operate utility fees for a facility like this? What are they paying for utility, water, all that kind of stuff?
I believe that it's a commercially rated property. Waters are metered, so that's per use, and then utilities, sewer would be on a commercial rate.
On a commercial rate, okay. And then the other question I had was not that it really matters. Why are we asking them to have 24-hour access to the laundry facility?
So on a site visit, there is a laundry facility there. One of the residences has the key. So if somebody wanted to use that, they would have to go and ask that key holder for the key to use the laundry facility. So the idea or the intent of that condition was so that either everybody has a key or there's a keypad so that everyone can use it unrestrictedly.
Right. Mayor Beamish.
Yeah, I have no problem with the application. In fact, I actually believe this is part of our affordable housing response, but it can be unsightly, and a lot of the units in there seem to have tarps over them, and there's no consistency in terms of color or how they're organized. And I'd certainly like to see the overall appearance of the site improved by not having tarps on property on the trailers that are in there. That's the biggest comment that I've received from neighbors up there is the unsightliness of it. And if it could just be improved by having not storing units in there, but having them all in there and occupied, and not tarps, that would be great.
My only comment to that, I'll go to Scott next, is recognize that might require individuals, costly repairs. And anyway.
Or management of the site.
Or what's that?
Management of the site to require that.
Scott?
Thank you. Yeah, I'm in general, I'm in full support of the application. I live down the street, so I noticed that a huge portion of the site was just cleared, all the trees were removed, and it was sort of flattened. And it would be nice to see a plan of where the proposed new pads would be, of like the 5 to 7, I guess, new RVs could be parked. And it sort of goes to the mayor's point about the kind of tidiness of the site, because I mean, you could just drive 4 or 5 RVs onto this huge site and they can start to create a sort of informal tent city in a way. But if I had a better understanding of a kind of an overall, master plan of how these RVs kind of sit with each other, it would be, easier, because I see that there's no privacy screening requested right now for North Road. And so, you can see the RVs from Hillcrest, but you could also see them from North Road if they were strewn about the site, let's say. So some more information I think would be useful for me.
I like that recommendation. I also like the idea of screening along North Road.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to motion that we include that in our recommendation. Screening on North Road in a site plan. Yes, corporate officer.
Hi, that would be a motion to amend.
Yeah.
And if you could itemize all the things you're looking for in the motion to amend so I can record them, please.
Okay, Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, I agree. Maybe part of that screening would be like a landscape plan or something like that, rather than fencing or
right.
Anything to make it worse. Some greenery and so on and so forth. So
okay.
Maybe as amended, it would come back with a landscape plan, which would encompass screening.
Perfect. Okay, so help me out here, corporate officer. So a motion to amend the recommendation that staff. Sorry.
That's okay. If you'd like some help, I took some notes, so I have some suggested wording for the amendment.
Okay.
I've got 3 items so far from discussion. That a site plan be provided, that a landscape plan in order to address privacy be provided, and that the site address elements that are contributing to an unsightly premise, such as tarps.
Can you make it privacy and screening?
Yeah.
It's not just about the privacy, it's about. Okay, so can I move that? Get confused on process. Can I move that then, corporate officer? Okay, I'll move that. Does someone want to second it? Councillor Lumley will second it. Yeah, Councillor DeAndre.
Is it possible to put in the amendment that notification be sent to 100 radius, 100-meter radius? Just because for the level, the impact that the project can have, I think is fair.
So that's an additional motion.
Yes, so we've already got a mover and seconder, so we'll have to do another amendment after this amendment is voted on.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. Are people in favor with the recommendations?
Help her out.
This is in favor of the amendment.
Yeah, in favor of the amendment.
All in favor of the amendment, yes.
Thank you. And now, Councillor DeAndre, you want to make a motion that the notification is extended to 100 meters? Does someone want to second that?
I'll second that.
Mayor Beamish will second it. Further discussion? Councillor Kroll?
If you have a look at the location of the site, it is surrounded with quite a bit of already zoned commercial. So, obviously you're not going to get a lot of feedback from the hydro transformers across the street. So, Councillor Dendretti's suggestion of the additional radius, I think is reasonable to encompass a broader selection of neighbors as opposed to commercial properties that wouldn't have any impact on. So I'll support her motion.
Okay, so all in favor? Okay,
So the amendment.
that was what's that?
That-
The amendment.
That was the amendment. All in favor? Yeah. So we're good.
No, now you got to vote on the main resolution as amended.
Okay. And that is, and further that, can you read it out, Councillor or Corporate Officer?
Yes, so both amendments were passed. And so now the motion reads, and further that council directs staff to publish notice. I'm sorry, I missed one. And that council directs staff to notify property owners neighboring 718 North Road of the temporary use permit application, and that radius has been extended to 100 meters. And that council directs staff to publish notice of TUP 2019-03 in the newspaper. And further that staff proceed with drafting TUP 2019-03 subject to the owner meeting the following conditions no later than June 19th, 2020. And those conditions are now wildlife resistant garbage containers to be provided and arranged to be collected fortnightly. All outdoor fridge and freezers to be placed in wildlife resistant containers. 24-hour access to laundry facilities for all members of the site to be provided. Privacy screening along Hillcrest Road to be provided. Rental cap of $500 per pad for the duration of the temporary use permit. Bond to be provided to cover cost of site remediation. A site plan be provided. A landscape plan to address privacy and screening. And that they address elements contributing to an unsightly premise, such as tarps.
Okay. Mayor Beamish?
I don't see a term in here for the temporary use permit. Is that intended? Is it a 1 year, 2 year, 3 year?
I think all temporary use permit, go ahead, Katie.
So right now we're looking at drafting the temporary use permit. So you're not considering the temporary use permit right now. When it comes back to council, they would be looking for a 3-year term.
Thank you.
Okay, so does someone want to move it as amended? Is that what I'm doing, right? No.
It's already on the floor, so you just need to call for a vote in favor and those opposed.
Okay, so all in favor? Good. No one's opposed. Great, that passes. Okay.
Chair, did I hear the 100 meters? Or I didn't hear the 100 meters.
The 100 meters is not part of the resolution. What is in the resolution is that council directs staff to notify property owners neighboring 718 North Road. And because the 100-meter motion passed, that will be amended to 100 meters.
Okay. Moving on to report 3.4, again, planner 1, and this is regarding the development variance permit and development permit for 721 Wynn Road. So over to you, Katie, again.
Thank you, Chair Ladwig. So the town of Gibsons has received applications for a form and character development permit and a development variance permit for the existing C5 building at 721 Wynn Road. The building was constructed in 1989 as a mixed-use building with commercial units at grade and a large residence above. Over the years, the building has been renovated, and currently the configuration has several commercial units at grade and 4 apartment units above. These apartment units do not conform to the BC Building Code nor to the zoning bylaw. Therefore, the owner would like to bring the property back into compliance with the BC Building Code and the town's zoning bylaw through a development permit and a development variance permit. The applicant has requested 2 variances to the zoning bylaw. The first is a relaxation from 11 parking spaces, which is outlined in section 6.12 of the zoning bylaw, to 9 on-site spaces. And then a relaxation to 3 of the 4 apartments to be less than the 55 square meter area stated in the C5 zone. So staff used the council policy 3.9 to assess the variance request and found that the property has had 9 spaces with the current apartment and commercial configuration without issue for a number of years, and therefore recommends moving forward with notifying neighbours of the application for input. A development permit has been applied for due to several proposed changes to the form and character of the building, and these are in relation to BC Building Code regulations. Firstly, they'd be changing the asphalt roof to metal, and also revising 2 of the roof lines on the front elevation, one of which would become a flat roof over the front entrance. So if you see figure 2 on page 2 of the staff report, that roof would become flat. Secondly, they're looking at installing external staircases from the apartment unit decks, which are shown in figure 3, that's page 7 of the staff report, and that's to conform to the egress regulations in the building code. They're also looking at adding a new deck to the rear of the building, adding new landscaping at the rear of the property, including adding some vegetable gardens for the tenants. They're looking to replace the vinyl siding with hardy board planks to the proposed colors Blue Moon and Blue Overalls, which both can be seen in figure 4 on page 7 of your staff report. And the roof color would be a Regent Grey. And lastly, they're also looking at adding a new sign, which would be above the main entrance. And that's shown in attachment A, page 18 of your staff report. Staff have reviewed the proposed changes alongside DPA 5, Gibsons Landing. And while a number of the guidelines aren't applicable because the building's existing, it's already there, the proposed building upgrades does improve the current building, and therefore staff recommend authorization of the development permit, which is DP 2020-09. The recommendations are on page 1 of the staff report.
Okay, thank you very much. Motion to receive the report. Councillor Crowell, always quick to have his hand up. Anyone else? Councillor Lumley. Okay, open for discussion.
All in favor?
Oh, sorry, all in favor. I'm getting tired, sorry. All in favor, thank you. Open for discussion. Councillor DeAndrade?
Yes, it's a clarification because on page 5, on number 6, it says staff recommends reviewing this limit to determine if minimum apartment size in commercial zone should be removed from the zoning bylaw to allow smaller and encourage more affordable units. But then the resolution, the recommendation is that recommends to remove the minimum. So I got confused because first there's this kind of recommendation on page 5. And I mean, obviously I was looking for the rationale I don't have, I know Vancouver does minimum 382 feet, I guess. So super tiny apartments. But obviously one concern I have is with parking, even though the proponent is saying that there has never been an issue, but I don't know, depends on, I would like to understand, is there any restriction if people already living there have cars and the next person comes, would they be advised that they cannot have a car? So I'd like to understand, or they're occupying like a street, and is there, I don't know. I'm always concerned with parking because the big problem in Lower Gibson is parking. And so obviously if he do a renovation and goes back to the size permitted, the 55 square meters, he resolves the problem, because then he needs only 8.5 parking. So that would be solved. But I'm not saying that we should go in this direction necessarily, because I don't understand the rationale for 55, but I'm concerned with the lack of parking.
Okay, others? Councilor, sorry, Councilor DeAndre, I don't mean to.
Well, just a clarification as well on the point that I asked first, because there's two kind of conflicting recommendations, right? The first one, it talks to determine, but then it recommends to council to remove.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Through you. I'm just wondering. Where are we looking at?
Okay, on page 5, the first item 6, it talks about the variance, it talks about the size, the 55 square meters. And then it says, staff recommends reviewing this limit to determine if minimum apartment size in commercial zones should be removed from the zoning bylaw to allow smaller and encourage more affordable units. So the recommendation here is to review the limit. But then on the agenda, it goes straight to remove the minimum.
I can speak to this.
Yeah, sure.
If that'd be helpful. So the variance is requesting to relax the minimum size. So that is what's being considered in this DVP application. And the comment to review whether the minimum apartment size is needed in commercial zones, that's a bigger, that's a different, like a discussion that has come out of this DVP application. So we would be looking at whether it is necessary to have a minimum apartment size for mixed use development projects.
Okay. But it's not here, the recommendation at this point. This will be for the future.
Yeah, so that could be and further that staff look at the implications of minimum apartment sizes in the zoning bylaw.
Can I, before I move on to Mayor Beamish, do we have a minimum apartment size in residential?
No,
No,
it's just in the commercial mixed use zones.
Right. So by removing it would bring us more consistent with other types of zoning, right?
Yeah.
Makes more sense. Yeah. Okay, Mayor Beamish.
I think what Director of Planning just said would be probably preferable than the fourth or the third and that in the resolution that we have, because that actually recommends that council direct staff to remove the minimum unit size for apartment. Maybe to investigate the implications of removing is what maybe should be said.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Kroll.
I'm sort of in favor of the proposal. Something that, with the smaller apartment size and the location of the building, it is on public transit. So, it's a situation where someone could have an affordable apartment and, if they worked in the lower village or something like that, walk to work, the fact that it's on public transit, they may not have a car. So, I appreciate Councillor Danfretti's concern about parking, but it's also exasperating when you see buildings with great big parking lots that sit empty most of the time. The only time I've ever seen that parking lot full is at the night markets at the public market, and people have poached in the parking lot. So, I don't really, because of the apartment size, I don't really think it's a huge issue in this particular situation.
I will say that I would like to see our parking requirements amended anyways, overall. So, I mean, I think right now, and Katie can correct me, but I think it's 2 stalls per, no, but in general, like our residential parking requirements is 2 stalls per townhouse, 1 stall per apartment. It's something like that.
Yeah, so you have 2 stalls for a single family, a duplex, or a townhouse, and 1.5 parking spaces for an apartment building or apartment unit within an apartment building. And then for commercial, it's one space per 45 square meters of commercial space. So if you have a mixed use building, your parking is cumulative. So we look at the residential component plus the commercial component, and then add them all together.
Right. Okay. Okay. Well, I'm not as concerned about the parking, although I understand Councillor DeAndretti's point. Just because we don't see all the people using those stalls right now, unless there was some kind of a covenant or unless there's a requirement that the owner puts on the lease agreements or the rental agreement saying you can't live here with a car because I don't have enough parking spaces for you, then there's nothing stopping him from renting it out to people with more cars and more congestion in parking. This is a bigger issue though that spans beyond just this one project, in my opinion. Corporate officer.
I'm sorry to break in, just a reminder of the time.
Right, thank you. Okay, we've got 10 minutes to go. Can I get a motion to extend the meeting, Councillor Lumley?
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't this where Scott and Clifford earn their keep here?
I think they've been earning their keep pretty well in this meeting altogether. What do you mean specifically?
Well, design, for like what the whole project entails. Like there's design aspects and layouts and stuff. I'd like to hear what they have to say.
Absolutely. Let me just deal with the timing issue right now. We've got 9 minutes left. I guess it depends which computer I'm looking at. Can I get a motion to extend to, I don't know, what count or corporate officer, do we have another meeting right at?
It's at 6.
It's at 6, okay. Can I get a motion to extend to say 5:30? No. Well, we all have to agree, right? Isn't that how it works? So we don't all agree. Okay, how about 5:15? Okay, 5:15 it is. So let's keep it rolling here. All in favor? Sorry, what?
A mover and a seconder.
Okay, 5:15. Somebody moves that. Councillor Kroll moves it. I move it. Councillor Kroll seconds it. All in favor? Okay, great. Okay. Well, Councillor Lumley would like to hear from you two guys. So what are your thoughts, Cliff?
Yeah, so quickly I would say that when we're talking about the parking, I actually think it's one of the great advantages of these mixed use facilities is that 5 days out of 7, when you most need the parking spaces for the commercial area, the residences are usually out at work. So there's some, I think, actual real good arguments that probably the parking restriction or the parking requirement is too strict on this property. I would also like to say that in general, I actually don't really very much like small apartments. I think the 55-meter limit makes some sense, but I am certainly open to smaller ones when they're specifically created with low cost housing in mind. So with this project, I just don't have a good feel for what's going on with this building. I hate rewarding somebody who does illegal renovations and puts in undersized apartments. Like, I just kind of don't like the idea of doing that. That being said, I think all these arguments are that they're entirely appropriate, needed in this town. I'm probably going to go vote to, recommend the, recommend the variance, but I don't necessarily like it. Yeah, I guess those are my comments.
No, those are really good comments. I appreciate that. That does remind me, one of the things I wanted to bring up was whether or not we could put a covenant on an affordable housing cap for what's being charged for these apartments if we allow the variance. So I'll leave that with that, and then I'll hear from Scott.
Thanks. That's a good recommendation, Councillor, about the cap. This building, like, it's a classic example of it's easier to ask for forgiveness than it is for permission, and it is a bit of a reward to approve this one. And I certainly am going to approve it, but I don't love the extra stair. I don't know why you need it. The 2 units have exits anyway, so it makes me kind of feel like maybe something else is going to be happening there. You could actually get rid of that hallway now, because everyone has like access to straight from their apartment to an exterior space, so there's no real requirement, I think, for an interior corridor. Maybe that's like a covert plan, I don't know. But so it starts to look like a kind of a college dorm house, where like it was used to be used for like multi-generational families, and then the owner split them all up and put a stair on each face, right? And that's kind of what's happening here, is like there's 3 stairs coming out of this thing. That said, one of my least favorite things in the world is vinyl siding, and the fact that they're willing to put a different kind of nicer siding material on the house, on the building, I think is a real kind of win for the street, and I commend them for doing that. The flat roof on the front is, it's harder to maintain. The people have to look down from their windows and look at kind of a dirtier flat roof versus a sloped roof, but it does allow for some more modern signage. So I think that that's probably just, fine. So I approve it. In terms of the size, I rent a place in Vancouver that's like 400 square feet, and it's perfect for me. And I wouldn't want anything bigger. So it sounds like the square footage sounds scary, but I think if you're like a single person who's just coming in for work or whatever, that kind of thing can work really well. And maybe that's what's happening here. But either way, I think what it does is it brings the cost down. I would assume that a smaller unit brings the cost down, and I'm in full support of that, of releasing the requirement for a 55 square meter thing. Maybe there's a way to provide a recommendation where like we recommend that a unit size be a minimum of this amount, but not actually make it a requirement. Or maybe there's a recommendation for a mixed use type of thing where you've got a certain number of small spaces, and then those are offset with a number of larger spaces too. So you've got more mixed use type of housing. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I appreciated Scott's comments about the fact that you're renting a space that's only 400 square meters and it feels right for you. And I do think that there is a need for these small units in town. So, I do support, I'm feeling like I want to support this variance, but I want to go back to the comment I said a minute ago about a covenant on asking the owner to cap the affordable housing rate that they charge, because I do like what Cliff said. You don't want to reward people for renovating illegally and then just ask for forgiveness afterwards. So I think there needs to be some kind of motion in there that deters that type of behavior. Katie, do you have any comments about that?
Yeah, I should clarify that the current owner didn't do the renovations. He's bought it, and now he's bringing the building into conformance.
And I never assumed that they did. It doesn't matter. The point is the work's been done. I wasn't assuming that this current owner did.
But what we can do is when we bring the development variance permit for consideration at council, we can add that condition that they have to go into a housing agreement, and then we would issue the DVP, if that works for you. Because
alternatively, they could just as easily, not just as easily, but they could renovate the building, reduce one unit, make them all conform in size, and that's fine, right? So if they want the extra unit, we should ensure that they're providing affordable housing for this extra for the extra unit. Mayor Beamish.
Are you suggesting the extra unit be the affordable housing, or they all be affordable housing?
I don't know, to be honest, I hadn't.
Yeah.
I suppose we can't ask that they all be, can we? I mean, to me, to some extent, it's a bit of a moot point because you can only, I know as a landlord, you can only ask so much for such a small space. People just won't pay for it. But it's still important that we reflect this in our thinking so that we deter this kind of behavior where you renovate first, ask for units later. Director of Planning.
Thank you, Chair. The property is zoned for mixed use, so they are allowed to have residential units above. So the variance, I think in exchange for variance, it's fair to ask for a reduced rent, but it would only be for the units that have the variance request.
Right.
So I would suggest that it only apply to the units that are under 55 square meters.
Yeah, fair enough.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. So can I make a motion for that? Over to you, corporate officer.
And from the committee's discussions, I've taken away 2 further amendments and some changes to the last amendment, the wording, if you'd like me to read them all back for the committee's consideration.
Sure, that'd be great. Thank you.
And that the Planning and Development Committee recommends that council direct staff to notify neighbors of development variance permit application DVP 2020-01 at 721 Wynn Road, and that the Planning and Development Committee recommends that council authorizes the issuance of development permit DP 2020-09 for 721 Wynn Road. And further, that the Planning and Development Committee recommends that council directs staff to investigate removing minimum unit size for apartment units in commercial zones. And further, that and that takes care of this one. And further, that a housing agreement condition be added to the DP for the units subject to the variance.
Yeah.
Sorry, just jumping in there. The housing agreement would be subject to the DVP.
Thank you.
Now, if we're asking, council direct staff to remove the minimum unit size, then it's kind of weird that we've got 2 different. So now I'm confused. Councilor, ready?
That's to investigate removal. We may not do it.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, and I would also, obviously, if we do, I don't want to leave it loose because some people might have an idea that they can do a 200 meters. You know, some people would go to this extent, right? So I think there's a minimum that we should respect, right, for livability. So may investigate what will be the remove and what will be the minimum requirement or things like that.
Katie?
I'm just wondering if we read the motion again and have it as that council directs staff to review the minimum unit size for apartment units. I think that's what it was meant to say at the beginning. It was just a bit of a typo, and it might be a bit clearer.
That sounds good to me.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so that motion, as Katie suggested and as corporate officer read, is on the floor. Can I get a motion to, okay, Councillor Crowell, Mayor Beamish, all in favor? Good. Yay, we're done our reports. Thank you, Katie.
And just to, if I could just let you know that, like, my son lives in 300 square feet in Surrey, and that's above their minimum size, I think.
Hmm. Sorry about that. Okay, so just going back to our agenda. I think that wraps up our reports. Okay, we're on to inquiries. Part 4 of the agenda. Is there any inquiries for us, corporate officer?
Thank you. Just a review of the rules for inquiries. It is allotted a total of 10 times per the agenda, but we do only have 6 minutes left in this meeting, just so everyone is aware. For those attending the meeting, if you have an inquiry for council, if you could use the raise hand feature at the bottom of your screen, and I'll turn your audio on so you're able to ask that question. We do have one inquiry. I'm just moving Michael Storr over. And Michael, you should be able to ask your question if you take yourself off mute at this point.
Michael, you're still on mute.
The mute button can be found in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen.
Sorry about that. My name is Michael Storr. I live at 400 Stewart Road. And I did write a letter about the, I didn't understand that the bylaws had it that Mr. Klaus couldn't, Klaus Furners couldn't ask for a 2-year extension. And I'd like to know if the Director of Planning could explain to me where she came up with the idea that he can do that. Could you please explain? Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. Over to you, Director of Planning.
Sorry, I didn't quite understand that question. It was about the time frame of the
Yes.
permit.
Oh, can I clarify it?
Yes, please.
Earlier, you said that he was allowed, the developer of the George was allowed to get a 2-year extension. Under what circumstances could he do that under our bylaws? Because our bylaw does not allow that.
This the development permit. Well, what happened was he applied for an amendment to the permit to amend the expiry date.
But you have to amend the bylaw. You can't just amend a permit. You have to amend the bylaw to include that, do you not?
No, you can amend a permit.
Under what bylaw can you amend the permit? The bylaw states that you can only allow for a 1-year extension, but he's been getting granted 2. So I wonder why the bylaw has been ignored.
I'm not sure what bylaw you're talking about.
I'm talking about the development.
But they can apply for an amendment to the permit, which is what we've done.
The bylaw is a development application procedures bylaw 1166, and it's 2016. And 3B2 states that the development permit falls under that bylaw. Then in 5.2, it says that he can only, that a developer, a development permit expires after 1 year. And he's been getting 2. So I wonder under what mechanics of that, how do you do that without amending the bylaw? You don't amend the permit, you amend the bylaw to allow the permit to do that, do you not?
Through the chair, I'll have to look at the bylaw that you're talking about, and,
Well, the bylaw
I can answer you
is in,
offline if you like.
well, the bylaw states that he cannot do that. So, and I'm wondering why he's being allowed to do it and why it's even a topic of discussion. If there's a bylaw there and everybody's agreed on the bylaw, then why are you changing it or allowing it 2 year?
Chair, can I comment that this is actually,
Mike, not to cut you off, Michael, but I do have a question for Mayor Beamish, and I'd just like to give him an opportunity.
I'd just like to comment, this is something that happened previously. We are recommending a 1-year extension at this time, so it's a moot point at this time. And it's arguing something that happened in 2018 as opposed to now. And suggest that the Director of Planning can respond to Mr. Storr directly.
It's moot today, but is it going to be moot in a year? Like if he comes along and says, I need 2 years, are you going to say, well, your previous council given 2 years, therefore we're going to do it again? So the previous council and mayor, and I agree with you, it's moot today, but it might not be in the future. So I'd like to express my opinion that we should use the bylaws and not just change stuff without amending bylaws. Otherwise, we're all just like the bylaw officer. I can park on wherever I want, and I can tell the bylaw officer that I'm amending the parking if I want to.
Okay, so thank you for that. I think it's a good question, Michael. And do we agree that Director of Planning is going to get back to you? I think she probably wants to review the document herself, probably. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think I've got a different version of a bylaw than he does. So I think, Michael, if you can contact me or send me that section directly, I can respond to you directly.
Yes, I'll send it to you then.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would be curious to hear as well.
Well, I sent a letter that
I got it. It was helpful. I appreciate it.
Has bylaw in it.
Yeah.
So everybody's apprised of it, and then they're all sitting around arguing about whether or not you're going to allow 2 years or 1 year. And it's a moot point because he's only being allowed 1 year. But in the future, what is going to happen? Is it going to be 1 year, 2 years, or will somebody decide that it's going to be 3 years? So I just want to defend the bylaw.
I just didn't stay cognizant of time.
There is nothing in the bylaw, the 1166, that limits the extension of a development permit. I can't find that section. So
it says
I think you have an old version of a bylaw.
So that's why I'm off the town's website. So
fair enough. I think we should have this discussion offline though, so that we can look at the same document.
We've already agreed to deal with this. I think we've already extended past what we've extended. So I think we logically we got to move on.
Okay, thank you, Michael. And I, do carry on with the Director of Planning, and we'll get that straightened out. Is that it for inquiries, corporate officer?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Okay,
oh, Mayor Beamish?
Move adjournment.
I move to adjourn. Councillor Lumley seconds that. All in favor? All right. Thanks, everyone. See everybody at 6.
Thank you.
Okay.
6.
Thanks, Cliff. Thanks, Scott. Much appreciated.
Yeah. Talk to you later. We'll see you all soon.
Yeah. Thank you very much.